$0 to $2,500, the financial cost of adopting each child through the foster care system. I'm your host, Marcy Bursack, and I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to find more forever families. In fact, one for each child waiting in the foster care system. After blogging my journey adopting a pair of siblings, I realized that I knew countless people who had a desire to adopt, but believed it was too expensive. So I wrote a book for adults, The Forgotten Adoption Option. I wrote a book for children, Are You a Forever Family? And I started this podcast. I am so delighted that you are tuning in. In season 2, I'm dropping monthly episodes to teach you how to adopt those U.S. children who are waiting for you in the foster care system. You might also enjoy the personal stories of adoptive parents and adopted children that I featured in season 1. Now, whether right now feels like the right time, the process feels overwhelming, or someone quickly comes to mind to share this with, I am here for you. I am America's foster care adoption mentor, and I'm eager to help you fulfill a child's dream of having their forever family. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, you're going to learn how to use the kitchen to connect with children who've been in foster care. I am joined by adoptive dad, Chef Kibby. Hi, Chef Kibby.
Thank you so much for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I love that. And you're my first chef, which I think is so cool. Chef Kibby and I met through LinkedIn. In fact, he commented on a post I wrote about foster care adoption. And then we had this opportunity to connect through our shared passion for children touched by the foster care system. He's a biological foster and adoptive dad. And during the pandemic, he pivoted from a catering business to helping foster and adoptive parents connect with their children through the shared act of cooking and eating together. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because I feel like I've learned a lot as we prepared offline. And I think there's just such a value of a new way or a different way to think about how do we connect with our kids. And so kind of getting started with that, let's start, Chef Kibby, with your family unit. So how many children do you have and what got you involved in the foster care space?
Well, currently, I have 3 children in my home, 2 biological children and 1 that we adopted out of foster care. Any day you could get a phone call and the numbers might change. I'm sure you and your audience understand that. My wife and I got into foster care many years ago. It had always been on my wife's heart to bring in children from outside of her family of origin. And so that was a discussion that we had even back during our engagement process. And then eventually when the time came when we were ready to begin to invite children into our home, we didn't feel that financially we were in a place where we could do a straight adoption. And so we decided in the meantime to check out this whole foster care thing, not any under preconceived notion that every child that gets placed with us is necessarily going to be made available for adoption, but that could be the potential outcome. And for us, that has been the case for one of our placements, that we were able to adopt and make them a part of our forever family. So that's kind of where things are now.
How neat. So how old are your kids right now?
They're between the ages of 13 and 7. And
okay, so you're kind of like
girls.
And so you're spread across like middle school to elementary school?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, how neat. And I'm wondering too, you mentioned that this was always on your wife's heart. And in my very first episode of this podcast, my husband came on and talked about, he was kind of the reluctant spouse that like eventually came around. What is your story of like, were you on board when she mentioned it and you were like, sure, I can do that? Or were you kind of the one that needed more time to process getting involved in this space?
There wasn't really a whole lot of processing, for me at least. There wasn't any immediate hesitation that came to my mind about it. Now, in hindsight, once we got into it, then it was, and when you get your first placement, you're like, whoa, what is this? What did we sign up for? And I don't think anyone is necessarily fully prepared for bringing in children, especially through foster care, who come through hard places and everything that comes with it, which has definitely been a part of my journey and has brought me to where I am today. But when we first began to discuss the idea, I didn't have any experiences either firsthand or through things I'd read or seen in the media that would give me any immediate hesitation to invite children from outside of our family of origin. They may be different from other people, but for me personally, I was like, okay, sure. If that's what you want, and you're the one I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with, I'm on board. I support it.
That's great. And I love that you all had that conversation like pre-marriage and you're like, okay, so one day. And just to clarify for our listeners too, because there are different language like terms used of like foster to adopt or foster care adoption. And some people do the path that Chef Kibby's talking about where you become a foster parent and the data shows that about 50% of the time children in foster care do return to their biological families, but then that leaves 50% of the time they don't. And so sometimes as the foster family, you can potentially be selected as that adoptive family. So that's one way to be in the space. The other space, which is more of what my husband and I did, is we pursued the foster care system to adopt children because there are 115,000 children who are currently in a foster home or like a group home. And legally, the state is their parent because they were in foster care. Their biological family went through the process of trying to become more stable. And as a result, their parental rights were terminated. And so I just want our listeners to know that like there are different ways to do this. So if you were like Chef Kibby and you're like, man, I've always wanted to adopt, but geez, it's got to be expensive. It actually isn't. If you adopt waiting children in foster care, out of pocket, you're spending between $0 and $2,500. And then there at the federal level is a tax credit that will refund that plus more. I think I was looking recently, it's to like the tune of like $14,000 per child in foster care because all children in foster care are deemed, if you will, special needs just because they've been in the foster care system. So it doesn't mean they've been diagnosed with something. It just means because of the journey they've taken, that's kind of how things are. So I just want to give our listeners some nuggets of different ways to look at things. And so, Chef Kibby, when we were preparing for this episode, you shared that you're not trying to make adults a better cook. Because I think I even asked you, like, hey, can we do a recipe? And you're like, well, that's not really the point, which I think is really good. So instead, you said that you're trying to help adults know how much better our relationships can be with our kids if we spend time with them cooking and eating with them. So can you give us like a deep dive into this space of what does that mean?
Absolutely, I would love to. Well, for me as a chef, it's easy for me. I'm sure your listeners would think this of me, that it's easy for me to say that food is something that's great to share with other people, and that cooking with other people is something great and fun to share. But I did not truly fully understand and embrace just how deep that went until I kind of went through my own journey. I mean, I am a professional chef. I've been in the food service industry for over 25 years, and I've always known that there's something special about food that brings people together because all of us eat and all of us need to eat. And so, which is one of the great things about being in food service, is that the industry is never going to go away because there's always people who want to eat, and there's always going to be people that don't want to necessarily cook for themselves every night of the week as well. And being in the industry, I've got to work in so many different concepts and be alongside so many different people of different ethnicities and backgrounds and perspectives than me. And it's just always fascinated me how food brings people together. But it wasn't until COVID happens. And with COVID came the dissolution, if you will, of my catering business. April of 2020 came. One of the things that you could not do anymore was meet in large groups and eat together. And that was basically my entire business at that point. For me personally, kind of, well, first of all, a sense of who I am as a person. There's a lot of my personal identity and self-worth that was wrapped up in that business. But also, if I'm being brutally honest, it was also kind of an escape route for me because also during that time, as a foster and adoptive dad, I was experiencing a lot of trials and tribulations of not understanding the needs of my children, not understanding the behaviors and the behavioral issues and kind of the butting heads that I was having with my children. And I felt like I was loving them, I was being consistent with discipline and with language, and it just wasn't working. And rather than thinking that there was something wrong with me, I was like, I'm just not getting it. So I'm going to escape into my work, and I'm just going to pray for my wife. Like I was literally praying for my wife, like, God, would you help her to be better at handling this? Because I'm just not doing a good job, and I think it'd be better if I just kind of, stay out of the mix. Do
Hmm.
my chef thing, helping other people to be connected in relationship. What a joy it was for me to to cook for a wedding reception and allow for the bride and the groom and their families to not have to worry about having enough brisket or anything like that, and just be able to be present in the moment, while at the same time I wasn't being present for my own family. And not that I think that we wished the pandemic or anyone would have wanted the pandemic to happen, but at least for me personally, I feel like God used that experience in my life to remove that escape route that I had from the problems I was facing as a parent and have to face it head on. And the thing that I did to help me kind of regain the sense of myself was come back to the kitchen because that was my safe place. Well, at the same time, saying to myself, and to my wife, we've got to figure out what I have been doing with our children isn't working, and so we need to find some help. And my wife was definitely on board with that, and it was in that part of the journey when we began to learn about trauma informed care and TBRI, trust based relational interventions, and got in a counselor, and we just really got serious. And during that process is when I really began to discover the true depth of connection that can have in the kitchen, because the kitchen helped me to reconnect with myself and my sense of self and ability and identity carried over into a language that I could speak to my children when I began to be vulnerable enough to allow them to be with me in the kitchen. And much of this was their doing, not mine. I began to see their needs differently. I began to see their behaviors differently. And I began to see my role in their life differently. And that's when the cooking is connecting mindset became real for me. And as I began to live it out, then using the platform that I'd already built as someone who was creating content online and using YouTube and podcasting to now shift my message away from just showing people how to cook, but how to use this inherent trust-based activity of the kitchen to communicate that trust and felt safety and connection with children who are just absolutely hungry for it.
So incredible. And I really appreciate the vulnerability of like, this is what I was kind of putting a shield up around. And man, the pandemic, like I couldn't be behind my little wall. Like I had to face it. When you said that your kids kind of did this almost like organically, that they just, so is the reel in your head, like you're in the kitchen doing your thing and they just came to help? Like what's the scene there that was really them kind of showing you that this was a great way to connect?
There is an actual scene, like in my mind, if it was like a movie, because there was one particular instance, one time when I was in the kitchen. And if you can imagine me in the kitchen doing my thing, chopping up vegetables, I remember specifically I was working with some cauliflower for dinner that evening, doing some roasted vegetables because I love roasted cauliflower. It's
Yum.
absolutely delicious. Anything in the brassica family, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, roasted people. But that's an entirely other discussion altogether. But I remember I was chopping some cauliflower, and the kiddos, the kid with whom I was having a really hard time behaviorally and relationally, she came up to me and she asked me a question that I was not anticipating. She came up to me and she asked me, Daddy, can I chop up your veggie scraps? And I just kind of like paused for a moment. I'm like, what? Chop up my vegetable scraps? It was a really unusual question for a number of reasons. First of all, like, why do you want to be here with me when I'm trying to prep for dinner? Or why do you want to do this activity that really isn't going to help me get dinner on the table? I mean, these are just vegetables we're just going to be chopping up and throwing into compost or feeding to the chickens the next morning. And so, not to mention the fact that keep me from being able to enjoy my time in the kitchen. But Marcy, there was something in me. Something said to say yes, to just let go of all the inhibitions and all the potential no's in this, and to see this differently. And so I said, sure, kiddo, let's get you an apron, let's get you a cutting board and a knife that is appropriate for your level of skill at this particular time in your life. And let's do it. Let's sure, why not? And it was the light bulb moment in my life. It changed everything for me because I saw her differently. I knew that when she was asking that, yes, there was a part of her that wanted to express some creativity, to make this salad that she was going to feed to the chickens the next morning, and she wanted to model what she saw in me. She wanted to honor me. She saw me as someone who was setting a good example for her, and she wanted to activate those mirror neurons in her prefrontal cortex to see how I was holding my knife using the pencil grip and the bear claw, and to model herself after me. And it's just so simple. I didn't really teach her from a exquisite culinary standpoint. I just allowed her to be with me in the kitchen doing what I happened to be doing at that moment. And it changed my perspective on her and myself and the role that I could play in her life by using the kitchen, which, whether we think about it on a regular basis or not, there is so much trust involved in the kitchen. And I don't mean trust as far as trusting somebody else to handle a knife or to be safe around fire, but making food for someone else. There's so much trust there. Children, although they may not be able to speak it in those terms, they understand that when they eat, it goes into their body and it makes them feel something. And so for them to acknowledge that this person who has brought, I have brought her into my world and into my life and into my family, she sees that I am doing this and then giving her food that makes her feel good, to then invite her into that process allows her to share that same empathy toward me. And, we get to sit down at the table together. And even if she just, broke apart the broccoli florets, she knows that she did something to contribute to the meal, and she knows how it makes her feel. And then she sees me eating the food that she has helped prepare and the smile that I have on my face. And it activates this feeling deep within her autonomic nervous system and into her mind that we have this shared experience, this shared empathy, this shared trust. And I'm telling you, it just changes everything. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to be something that even contributes to the dinner that night. It's just that level of vulnerability, like you mentioned earlier, of just allowing ourselves to bring a child into the kitchen with us and to experience that inherent trust-based activity. And that's the heart and soul of everything that I'm trying to do now. And when I'm so grateful that you reached out to me to allow me to share this message with your audience.
It's so incredible, and you're so welcome, because to me, you're right. Like, every day we all have to eat, right? And regardless if we're preparing it ourselves or going to get it or whatever the thing is, if we're drinking it, whatever it is, right? Like, we all have this basic need of food. And what's interesting to me in my head is you're describing this story about cutting up the scraps, which you're not going to consume yourself. They might go to compost or to the chickens. I'm thinking, man, it sounds like your chickens got a really pretty plate, though. Like, it was really nicely cut for them, right? Which is,
I got a picture of it. I put it on Instagram. I'm sure
oh,
the chickens didn't appreciate it nearly as much as my audience did, but it made such a tremendous impact on my life and on hers.
and to think that, like, the saying, right, of more is caught than taught, right? That she had countless times seen you in the kitchen doing things like this, and to emulate that, be it for chickens, right? But how incredible that bonding and all those pieces of chemicals in our bodies and brains that you mentioned too. It's interesting because to me, I'm thinking, Chef Kibby, this is like such a simple concept, but yet like such a deep and powerful opportunity if we see it and we do something about it, which is really awesome. So I know that you use, I think you call them 5 mindset pillars as you teach families how to connect in the kitchen. Can you teach us about those 5 pillars?
Very briefly, the 5 mindset pillars. I find it interesting that it happened to be 5 because there are 5 mother sauces in traditional French cooking. And so it's
Ha.
kind of like in traditional French cooking, there's these 5 mother sauces where if you learn those, you can make pretty much any sauce in classical French cuisine. And so for me, I have mindset pillars that if you can begin to embrace them, they're not recipes, they're not techniques, they're not knife skills, although I can teach you all of those things too. But if you can nail these mindset pillars and begin to think about yourself and your child in the kitchen differently, there's just a whole world of possibilities that are open to you. And the first of them being compassion. So having compassion for your child, that the behaviors that they're exemplifying and the relational issues that, at least for me, that I was having, was a lot of it was based on the fact that, children from hard places do have special needs. And like you had mentioned, whether they have a specific diagnosis or not, just the fact that they have been removed from the of origin, that has impacted them deeply. And they may not even be able to voice it at the particular chronological age where they are. It has impacted them when other, traumatic experiences and ACEs and complex traumas. There's so much that is affecting their ability to connect with you. And so when you begin to have compassion on them and compassion for yourself, to know that this activity that we have tasked ourselves with, of caring for orphans, of caring for children out of foster and adoptive care, is difficult and challenging, and that those connections aren't existing in our minds either. We can begin to have compassion for ourselves, and that allows us to be more present and more attuned, and to be just better present for ourselves and for our children, and then to see the compassion that is involved in food, because food is so central, so pivotal to the attachment process. I mean, anytime you see someone talking about attachment theory, you see kind of that chart, that diagram of child is hungry, child cries, caregiver feeds, the child is happy again. And there's a reason for that. Food is essential to attachment. And so starting out with the compassion for them and compassion for yourself, then you can move on to direction, and directing your child in a way that is, seasoned with that compassion, and not just, kid, do this, do that, do this, but giving them direction in a way that is inviting them into the process, letting them know that you are there for them, letting them know that you are inviting something and not just kind of forcing them into this activity. And sometimes that takes some creativity, it takes a lot of compassion and a lot of patience, but it's totally worth it because our kids are worth it. And then once you've directed them, once we're giving them direction, then it's time for encouragement, because even for me, I still get things wrong. I still screw up in the kitchen, and undoubtedly our children are not going to get things right the first or second or third or seventh time. And so learning how to be encouraging, because the last thing we want to do is make the kitchen another area of our relationship where we're just playing kind of behavioral whack-a-mole and just saying, no, stop, don't. But to be encouraging, and again, to be coming alongside of them and knowing that we're a part of a team, that we're doing this together. Fourth is empowerment, finding simple ways to give them a voice, and most often by giving them choices between different activities, between different ingredients, between the order in which things are done, but doing so in a controlled way where you control what they are choosing from, but you are still giving them a voice and activating those parts of their brain that allow them to, again, feel like they're trusted, that they are capable, and that they can make decisions for themselves. And then fifthly and finally, inspiration, because the activities that happen in the kitchen can inspire young people to know their self-worth, their ability, and can inspire them to be doing things, whether it be inside of the kitchen or far outside of the kitchen. Because cooking involves everything. I mean, there's math, there's science, there's chemistry, there's physics, there's history, there's language, culture. I mean, you name it. There's so many things involved in the kitchen that no matter what age your child is, no matter what their interests are, there's something to be seen and done in and around the kitchen that you can use to engage them wherever they are.
Those are interesting to your point of, these are more like seasoning ingredients of like how we think about the kitchen and giving choice, but having control. And I hope that this is giving our listeners, I know that it is giving me a whole lot of like, I could spin it that way. And I have a very vivid memory of my kids moved in on like a Thursday, and they were a 5-hour drive across state. So we went to bed really late, but the next morning I wanted to make pancakes because my family has a long tradition of like, you make hot breakfast on the weekends, and we were off work, to bond with our children. And we have these pictures of using, it was like a panini maker that folded out and became a griddle. We made pancakes together. And that's like a very fond memory of like our very early relationship. And so I love the things you're pointing out about, yeah, it might take longer and it might not go right the first time because things can get messy, right? You might put in like the salt when it was supposed to be the sugar, right? But the connection there could be worth just kind of giving yourself that bandwidth. That's beautiful.
Yeah, again, that starts with just changing the end goal, which, if I'm being honest, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, you're a chef, that's easy. No, it was really hard for me, because being a chef and being someone who wrapped up my personal kind of self-worth and sense of accomplishment in cooking to allow a child into that world with me, even in my own home kitchen, it took a lot of vulnerability on my part. And I had to shift a lot of the value in it away from me creating this delicious meal that my family is going to wow over, and then I'm going to take a picture of it and share it on Instagram so other people can pat me on the back or be inspired by it to cook for themselves, and move it all toward the connection piece, which at the end of the day is so much better a reward. And even, like you said, even if things don't go well, you're doing it together and there's connection. And sometimes the most connecting times that I've had with my children have been those times when things haven't gone well, because it gives me as a parent and an adult a very rare opportunity to mess up in front of my children and give them an opportunity to empathize with daddy and to maybe encourage me or to help me through something, or to even model for them how to get through something that's hard. How often do we get that opportunity as parents, and how much do our children need that?
Sure, but how often do we want that, right? Like there's such a humility in everything you just shared about like, but this was my thing. I liked my thing, and now it's a team thing. And you're only as strong as the weakest link, and they have no experience in this. So I'm laughing at myself in this because I'm like, yeah, those all sound great. But to give ourselves space to make those mistakes in front of an audience so that we can practice that empathy and that grace back and forth is beautiful. And I fully support it and can think of spaces in my life where I do that. But man, like to your point of, but this was mine, like it's a hard heart shift. But yet there's such great reward there. And Kibby, I know for you, food has this connecting power. And I think you even call it a different language. What do you mean by that?
Oh, food is a language that all of us inherently understand. Going back to this connection piece, this attachment piece. I am a chef. I'm not a mental health professional by any means, but I have read a few books and I've attended a few trainings. But
and lived this life, right? You've got lived
I've
experience
lived this
too.
life. I've lived it, and I've seen it in my life, and I've seen it in the other families that I've worked with, either through one-on-one coaching or group coaching, or through my Discord community or elsewhere, that there's something very central about food. Again, food is something that is outside of ourselves that we need from the moment that we were born. So from the moment we were born, there are things that we know how to do and things that we can do for ourselves, but food is not one of them. And so from the time that we are born to the time that we leave, food is something that communicates to us comfort and safety and trust. And we often overlook that because we live in a society where food is so easy to get now. It is so easy to source food that's already been prepared for us by people that we never see or never meet, delivered to our door. We are so disconnected from the process that when you begin to see the process, and I think that's kind of the first layer of kind of the connection language that we, first is just feeding them. Feeding them communicates to them that we care for their physical needs, their bodily needs. We give them food, they eat it, they feel the multi-sensory experience. There's more than just the food tasting good. It's the way it feels makes your belly feel, it makes your body feel, it makes your brain feel. It is one of the few things in our lives that really wraps up all of our bodily senses, which is why I think that cooking is connecting. Like, it connects us to ourselves too. But then when we begin to cook for our children and allow them to see the process, it deepens that level of connection that this person really cares for me. But then when you take it to that furthest level, when you invite them into that process, now they don't just care about my physical needs. Now we're connecting relationally and emotionally. And again, I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to be involving anything around the food. It could be as little as having them tie your apron strings, or have them set the table, or best of all, wash the dishes if you can get them to do that. They hear it. You know, they hear it, they see it, they feel it, they internalize it as much so, if not more, than our actual words can express. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't just make sense to me. I'm like, man, that's like an awareness of like, not like we've always been eating food, right? Like since the day we were all born, we've been eating. And I feel like this awareness of, whoa, under my nose this entire time has been this language that's being spoken without words, but there's so much more going on there. And I think pointing that out and helping us be intentional with, wait, like, it's not actually what we're eating. It's that we're doing it together, and that we're sharing in the responsibility of it, and we're cleaning up together, and we're sitting down together, hopefully free of distractions. And there's all those pieces that can really take what's right in front of us and use it in a way that's really powerful. And so I think you've given us some great just thoughts and practical ways to help our families and to think differently, and maybe create space for mistakes and conversations. And so as we wrap up, Chef Kibby, can you tell us, where do we find you online? I know you offer a lot of resources, including like what tools to buy for your kitchen. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, Cooking is Connecting is the name of my brand, my business, my personal brand. So cookingisconnecting.com is where you can connect with me. You can find the Cooking is Connecting podcast wherever podcasts are served. I also have some other great free resources on my website, including the Discord community, where we're having conversations about all sorts of issues related to foster care and adoption, and all the wins and the challenges that come along with that, along with some other opportunities to engage with me a little bit more deeply. So if your listeners would be so kind as to check out cookingisconnecting.com. And I just want to reiterate, I know that this mindset can be helpful for all families of all kinds, but specifically when it comes to bringing in a child from outside of your family of origin, this can be a game changer for you to use this language of food and cooking. Because again, going back to the very beginning, when you invite a child into your home, they have no emotional, neurological connection to you, and you don't have a connection with them either. And when you can start with that compassion and begin to use this language of food and cooking, it will change them and it'll change you. And if there's anything that I can do to support you along the way and to encourage you, I would be grateful to play that role.
So good. I love that you just said game changer. I'm like, man, that's like cover of magazine worthy, right? Like, listen to this episode because it's going to change things at home. It's so good, and with your family. So Chef Kibby, thanks for being my first chef on. It's a treat to have a foster, adoptive, and biological dad to share your own lived experience through what is your profession, but yet has transformed into a game changer for families of all kinds. So thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I do know I'm a little bit of a unicorn in this space, and I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you and to speak with your audience.
As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping to raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 120,000 orphans in the United States. By leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, and talking about this podcast, you can help a child find their forever family. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling group, through the foster care system, please visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find how to get started, and you can even order a copy of my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which will guide you through the entire process. You can pick from paperback, audio, and ebook formats, and you might be able to find my book at your local library. I welcome you to reach out with questions, comments, and your own adoption story. I would love to hear if you're signing up for training or where you are in the foster care adoption process. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for Marcy Bursack. I really appreciate you tuning in, for caring, and for sharing, because every child deserves a family.